La, la, la. Welcome once again to the Letterman Podcast. My name is Mike Chisholm. I am so excited to be here. If you listen to one or two of these in a row, you're probably sick of hearing that I am excited to be doing something. Well, that's just tough noogies. You're going to have to deal with that in your own brain, in your own heart. I'm excited about this stuff. I have a lot of energy to talk about David Letterman and company and all of the things they have produced in the past. But today is a different episode. It's a segment of the Letterman Podcast that we are dubbing, for now anyway, the Post Mortem. And it's not to talk about content from the past. How amazing is that? I got goosebumps running up and down my body right now. You know, I listened to our friend Mark Malkoff on the Carson podcast, and we just had a really cool guest in Tom Dreesen. We talked a lot about Frank Sinatra and a lot of things from the past. And we want to be a conduit. We want to be a torch in the passing of information. The transfer of knowledge, whatever you want to call it, of what Dave and company did. But fortuitously, we started this podcast while Dave is still creating content. The latest season of My Next Guest just dropped last week. 6 new episodes have come out. Dave is also on the YouTube. Please subscribe to the official Letterman YouTube channel. We are not affiliated with them in any way officially, other than the fact that we're admirers, but there's a lot of cool new shit coming out. And it's awesome to see Dave messing around with his staff and hopefully that expands, and who knows what that's going to evolve into, but it's exciting stuff. And so the Letterman Podcast, while we are definitely wanting to be archivists of sort, or commentators of the archive, we also want to acknowledge the new things that are happening. And in My Next Guest season 4, there have been a lot of very cool conversations that have already been started as these episodes have dropped. We are going to go through each episode with a special guest each time we do this. I'm very excited about that. Today's guest is a guy by the name of Rusty Shackelford, and that's his how everyone knows him. You may understand that is a King of the Hill reference. Well, for good reason. One of the many things that Rusty does is host a King of the Hill podcast, and he and his producing partner and performing partner Mike are doing all sorts of great things. And Rusty has, if you can believe it, he has more energy than I do. That might not be easy for you to believe, but it actually is true. I also love the fact that he has another David Letterman podcast as well. We're talking about this idea of a Letterman podcast network with other folks as well. Very exciting stuff. Wake the kids, tell the neighbors. I've been a guest on the show. We're going to have both of them on this show, shoot the bull in another episode moving forward of the Letterman Podcast. But today, Rusty is going to be our guest on the Post Mortem. Rusty, what's up, my man?
What's up, buddy? How you doing, man?
Oh, I'm fantastic. And I'm really excited to have you here. That is not just lip motion, show business, malarkey. That is the truth. You and I share the gift of enthusiasm. And I love that you're one of the people out there. When I just have nervous energy or excited energy, I can message you and go back and forth. And you're a guy that understands it.
I understand it completely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's great. It's great. I also love the fact that you're like 15 years my junior. I'm 46 at the time of this broadcast. How old are you?
I'm 31 at the time of this broadcast.
Yeah, so 15 years. I dig that. I was told there'd be no math, but that was easy math. And I love the fact that I'm a huge David Letterman enthusiast at 46, and the crosshairs of my enthusiasm for Dave on a chronological standpoint are interesting, because I was really young for the first few years of late night. A lot of seasoned fans, they go back to the morning show and early late night, where my enthusiasm really hit was when Dave made the move over for Late Show. So I've got a specific kind of viewpoint of Dave. You're 31, you're 15 years younger than me, and you have developed this appreciation. Now this isn't the official podcast where I go into your bio and all that kind of stuff, but I just want to talk about, you're a 31-year-old who has a massive enthusiasm for Dave and Company. Is there anyone around you your age that has that same affection?
When we were in school, there was a couple of friends that I had that I'm no longer friends with. It was just like high school buddies that, no friendship developed further than high school. There was a couple of us that really liked David Letterman, and every now and again would come back and, would throw a joke or something we had heard that night. And we would try to, just throw the joke to see who was really watching the show, just randomly throw one out there and be like, oh, that was on Dave last night kind of thing. And there was a couple of us that were watched it enough to where, somebody would throw a joke out. We would understand the reference or remember the point in the show where it was from or whatever. But no, I wouldn't say that there's too many 30-year-olds, I guess, that are enthusiastic, whether it be mildly or extremely enthusiastic about David Letterman. I feel like the kids who stayed up late, my mom worked nights, so I would stay up sometimes to see my mom when she got home from work, and my dad worked days, so by the time Letterman came on, it was like this transition phase, waiting for my mom to get home, and then my dad had just went to bed kind of thing. So it was like, all right, well, I'm going to turn the TV on for this short window, or whether, both parents were already home in bed. It was just something that I was able to do late at night because I've always had trouble sleeping, and it was just an outlet for that. But I guess my love really started for David Letterman after all the fun was sucked out of the world in 2001 with all the humor was just drained from that incident. And his after show was what really brought me into David Letterman's sphere, was that show afterward, and how he was able to kind of heal the late night world, as far as television, and just kind of the atmosphere that was being felt at that time, especially since it was his city too, you know what I mean? And the love for it really started, I guess, when I was a teenager, when all of the jokes became relatable and understandable. Like when I started to really get into the full swing of understanding humor, and also found weed at that time. So I want to say that that was a factor. I want to say that was a factor in some of it, and that's why I guess really enjoyed him. It was funny. It was something to laugh at. It was something stupid. Some of it was stupid. Some of it was super intelligent. It was just a wide range is what I always liked about it. You could get anything at any given time on any night on that show. And that's what really enamored me at a young age as a teenager.
This is a cool thing. There's a generation gap there. My oldest stepson is your age, and I mean, there's sometimes we are best friends. I'm a large child anyway, which is good, and I'm into all the nerdy things. I'm into sports. I'm into the comic books and the comic book movies and the Star Wars and all that stuff. And I am, I like to say that my inner child puts his grubby little hands on the steering wheel as much as he can. You and I are very similar in that, and the fact that I just appreciate so much, because I think a lot of us can put ourselves back to the 9/11 situation and Dave's reaction to it, his leadership in it, whether he would probably never.
He was the first, like he was literally the first to address it for sure.
Yeah. He, I watch that show every year. I've got that show on my hard drive and I watch it every year. And it becomes more fascinating. We're going to do an episode of that, and maybe have a roundtable about the 911 episode. So we got lots of meat on the bone. For this podcast, for this episode, for our dynamic and our relationship moving forward. Very excited about that. I was an honored guest on Wake the Kids and Phone the Neighbors. Appreciate everything you guys are doing, and I appreciate the fact that you and I, another way that you and I are similar is we want to transfer the knowledge. We're so excited about what we've seen, and in our minds, I'm not trying to overstep and say this, but I think you'll agree, and please disagree with me if you do. But at the end of the day, in our minds, this historical record of entertainment and comedy and insight there's a transfer of knowledge that needs to happen. And I know that you coming at this with your age and your enthusiasm makes you a perfect co-host for a Letterman podcast. And I'm so excited that we're linked up and we're going to go back and forth with each other on this. Yeah.
Yeah, so no, I do agree with you totally on that. There is a transfer of knowledge that needs to happen because late night, as it were, was a type of archive of pop culture and what was hot at, any specific day. You could even take it down to the day,
Sure.
what was hot that day or hot that week. And it was the same thing with Johnny Carson and how well they've managed to put him out there on Pluto TV, and he has the 24-hour channel that just runs nonstop with his content, and how they were able to take that and have that archive. And I just think that while Dave is still here and while he's still on this earth, we could go ahead and give him his flowers now and continue on with putting his content out there in the way that we saw it with our perception on it, because not everybody consumes media the same way, obviously. And that's what I think is great about being in the sphere of Letterman fans is everybody gets a different part of it that's funny to them. Some people didn't really like the daytime stuff, but they really loved him when he was on NBC. And then some people really don't like the NBC era and really love everything on CBS. And it's just chopped up, and you get all these different perspectives where it's not something that I guess I would have generally been exposed to had I not sought out this world. I went looking for this world. It didn't find me, kind of thing. I sought this world out because as a 31-year-old, I didn't really have anybody. I'm sitting here watching Letterman clips at night, just hanging out, winding down, and there's nobody to laugh about it with. There's nobody because my dad, he was a blue collar guy. So by the time late night came on, he was already boots up, asleep, kind of thing. He caught like The Simpsons at 5,
Yep.
King of the Hill at 5:30, and then Friends at 6, and then he might have been dozing off the rest of the night. Excuse me. So yeah, I didn't really have anybody to share the love of it with. So it's just great to be in this sphere for sure and be able to have these conversations.
That's what we're doing. That's what you're doing, as we build our communities respectively. Hopefully one massive, large community where we can have something for everybody. I always I got a little bit of history in the pro wrestling business. I ran a promotion, a fundraiser promotion where I'm from, this part of the world. And we've had a whole bunch of wrestlers around, raised a bunch of money for local charities with that. And so I'm sure those stories will come out here on the Letterman podcast, especially when we had Jimmy Hart up and we talked about Andy Kaufman and stuff. But the one thing that I want to build here is in the pro wrestling world, they talk about having the 3-ring circus. People might come out. Some people are coming out for the trapeze artists, and some people might come out for the dancing bears, although dancing bears, I think, is becoming a thing of the past. Some people may come out for the clowns. I don't know who those people would be. Got to watch out for those people. But that's what we got to do, right? We got to create this idea of a Letterman podcast network, this vision that I and others have is for exactly that, to celebrate all of the different corners. And I mean, it's a massive legacy. The fact is, we're going to talk about something current today. I'm excited that you're one of the people that are going to be on an episode of the Post Mortem. You and I are going to talk about Kevin Durant today. We're going to talk about so for folks who haven't watched the Kevin Durant episode, if you don't want to be spoiled, oh God, this is the only time I'm going to say this in the history of the Letterman podcast. You might want to hit pause. Don't hit stop. Please do not hit stop. Hit pause. Go to your Netflix, dial up the whatever, turn on the Netflix, watch the Kevin Durant episode, then come back here and hit unpause, and you will not be spoiled. If you want to be spoiled for the Kevin Durant episode, please feel free to keep listening. That's what we're going to talk about today. Kevin Durant played basketball in Texas. I hear the way that you speak and the dialect of your version of English right now. Clearly Texas. You got the Houston Texans hat on.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we got the Houston Texans hat.
Even though, little Easter egg, folks, Rusty used to have an English accent. Honestly, he learned to talk like this by moving to Texas. We will talk about that another day when we talk about his origin.
Absolutely.
We'll talk about that. But from Texas, current events, we're not political at all. Just like Dave, registered independent, we're right down the middle. But at the end of the day, human issue. At the time of this broadcast, a pretty horrific event happened in Texas just a day ago. School shooting. Unfortunately, it's not the first, but it was they're all horrific. but it just happened and it's fresh. How's the mood where you are in Texas right now, Rusty?
My wife being a teacher and my son being a student in a school, and it's, the same age group. My wife teaches third grade. So, and my son's in fifth grade. So it could be a kid that she taught. It could be, somebody sitting next to my son in class kind of thing. So it's a very somber mood. Everybody's, it's a loss for words kind of event. Every time it happens, you don't really have anything to say, but that's the problem. I feel like with the whole situation is that when these things happen, we send thoughts and prayers up to heaven along with our kids, but we don't do much as far as action goes. And I feel like you said, to keep it out of the political sphere of things, we need to do more as humans to make sure that these issues are addressed at the root cause, which the root cause is young men and mental health. That's the cause.
Yeah.
And guns are the underlying issue. As a Texas and as a Texan, and somebody who has been around guns the majority of my life, I don't think that taking away everybody's right to own one solves this problem. But I do feel like we need to address mental health in relation to guns and make the access, different, and how we're able to get these things. It shouldn't be as easy as buying a house or a car. A house or a car is more difficult to purchase than a gun in Texas, and that's not okay, I don't think. And my heart goes out to any parent and every parent that has dealt with the situation. But, I feel like it's controversial to say, but I feel for the young man as well that decided that's how he was going to, carry out his life. Yeah. And we need to embrace these young men that are going through these difficult things and find out why that's what's on their mind. And there might have not been any indicators. There might have not been any indication whatsoever that he was going to do anything like this. But I think that's a problem. We should see these things. It should be more transparent. We should be raising kids to be more transparent emotionally and to be able to discuss these things. Because I think a lot of kids are scared to discuss these things with their parents because of how their parent is now going to perceive them or whatever their parent may do. But we need to have more resources definitely available for any and all, everybody, not just men or young men, but young men, young women, everybody needs mental health, attention. Everybody, we all do.
Well, you're preaching to the choir on that.
Absolutely.
Believe it or not, to the viewers of the Letterman podcast, I know this thing's still kind of in its infancy. Believe it or not, I might have a little bit of acumen when it comes to podcasting, and any acumen that I have gotten up to this point has been because of the other podcasts that I host, over 100 episodes, called HeCast, the official podcast of He Changed It. He Changed It, of course, is the company my wife is building. It's a men's mental wellness platform, and it's what got me into podcasting in the first place. Men's mental wellness, I think, is paramount. The trickle down effect is insane. You talk about fathers, you talk about husbands, you talk about even having a sense of purpose and all of the mental health things that are happening. And what happens when that mental health circuit board seizes up and starts cracking and popping, and we're seeing the results of that. You and I could go way deep on this, and maybe one day we'll have you on HeCast and you and I can go back and forth on that.
That'd be
very,
wonderful.
very well said. Thank you very much for opening up and talking about that a little bit. I just think it's important that we acknowledge it. We can talk about the entertainment, and this is the stuff that makes me more grateful. It makes me hug my kids and my granddaughter that much tighter. And like you say, I mean, it hits close to home. The PTSD from that, just the blowback effect, witnessing what's going on. Please give your wife a hug for me, and teachers are so important, and I'm a virtual
Extremely.
hug to you guys from us up here in the studio as well. So love you so much. Thanks for talking about that. Let's move a little bit. Kevin Durant. Now, okay, I know you're in Texas. Sports are huge. For some
absolutely.
people, I think
pretty
sports
big.
are religion. It's that big.
Some sports. I think it's some sports. Yeah, I mean, there's multiple religions, right? So there's some people who hate baseball, but they would die for their football team, kind of thing. You're either all the way in or you're all the way out, kind of thing.
Yeah, and the enthusiasm goes people. It's funny. I'll get people every once in a while who look at me and they're like, "Oh, with all that you know about Dave and excited as you are about Dave, you're an obsessive. You are an obsessive person." I'm not. But what I do is I take my enthusiasm. I got Wayne Gretzky right behind me there. I'm a huge hockey is religion up here in Canada, where I'm from, Western Canada.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure it is.
Oh my God. And like since I was 2-3 years old, and my enthusiasm for my favorite teams and for the sport is pretty much the way that I exercise my enthusiasm for David Letterman. But for folks who aren't really into a sports team or things like that, it can be a little bit jarring. But at the end of the day, I think that sport, and this is where my love of personal development comes from, because it comes from the coaches and listening to some of these leaders within sport and the insights that they can bridge to us mere mortals who don't get so granular and focus in on being great at something to the point where you get to be elite at it. Every time Dave has somebody who is an elite performer in the athletic endeavor, no matter what that is, whether it's Lewis Hamilton, he's been on Peyton Manning's shows and things like that. But anytime Dave talks to somebody who has shown greatness in athletics, I'm in, because I'm going to get little nuggets of knowledge from that conversation, due to the fact that Dave is so damn good at pulling these nuggets out of these people, and in how his curiosity manifests itself and how he asks them about things. And then of course the subject, well, they just talk about what their regular life is, but the little kernels of knowledge that we receive, I mean, the personal development side of me is like, fuck yeah, I love this shit. And then the entertainment part of me is like, oh, I'm watching Dave and he's entertaining and he's funny and he played shuffleboard with Kevin Durant. I just went on a bit of speaking of Durant, I just went on a rant there. Would you agree with everything I just said there?
Yeah, for sure. So for me, I'm not like a huge basketball fan. I only watch basketball in the finals. I only watch hockey in the finals. A lot of sports I only catch at the very end, because for me, they build super teams and stuff like that. So there's no point in me watching like 20 other teams that suck all year long. So I would rather just wait till they're the drama of the sport. Yes. Absolutely. Football, on the other hand, I'm a Houston Texans fan, so I'll obviously watch, I'll watch terrible games most season long. It's watching terrible games. But
okay, well, I'm a Los Angeles Kings fan, so I've known a lot of pain in my life too.
Yeah,
so I get it.
For sure.
I get it.
So for me, the reason why I like seeing anybody interview big sports guys, it doesn't matter who they are, but for me, it's mainly, the elite, the big known guys, is because, they're seen as these heralded figures just way above the crowd, but at the end of the day, they're just as rooted to the ground as we are. I like the discussion where they were talking about bushels of crabs, and he was talking about back home in Maryland and discussing family events and things like that. It's just like, oh, well, he's just a normal guy too. He just can play basketball really good. Or the conversation around his mother too, and how she used to take him to the rec center to play basketball and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, that could have been just any guy I went to school with, it could have been any guy that I've known. And he just happened to be really good at basketball though, so and again, on the personal development thing, I like to see that too, because these guys are now, at 32 in basketball, 33, you're at the height of what is going to be your career. You don't really have much left as long as your career goes. So it was like
a new phase coming. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And how he compared it into a biblical sense. I'm not a religious man, but I really like the religious analogy where he used on the seventh day, God rested. After he completed his work. And that's how he now feels in his career. Like he's learned everything he's going to learn. He could still develop and get better, but like, as far as how he handles himself as a human being on and off the court, he's established. It is what it is, as he said. So yeah, I really like that, because I feel kind of the same way, because me and him are around the same age and come from the same generation. And, it's taken us our 30 years of living and experience. And that's another thing I liked about what he said, how he lives in his experiences, was, we've come to this, this culmination point where it's like, I am who I am, and unapologetically I can be me. and whether the world likes that. And in his sense, he's got thousands of millions of eyes on him. So he's now comfortable with himself to a point where he doesn't have to be angry. He doesn't have to be upset with the world. He could just be who he's going to be unapologetically and live his life, according to his own plan.
See, folks, look at this. This is exactly what the Post Mortem is going to be. All like a beautiful, unique Fabergé egg, depending on who our guest is. This is what I got from this stuff as well. It's not just entertainment on the Netflix. You can get these philosophical messages out of these shows, and having Kevin Durant on my next guest also provided a lot of entertainment. Dave and Kev played shuffleboard together.
Yeah, that was awesome. Yeah. I never even knew the name of a shuffleboard stick being a tang. I thought that was crazy. I've never even heard of that before.
Well, and this is where I love Dave so much. Dave goes in and he can get really granular, and he's always been good at this. He really granular on something that, including especially actually, because he's such a good wordsmith, just the vocabulary. Kevin Durant and David Letterman playing shuffleboard, talking about, the shit that you're talking about here, just life and analyzing life a little bit. And as they're doing it, learning how to play shuffleboard for the first time. And Dave's just reading the terminology. The thing that you slide along the ground, what's it called? A biscuit. Well, that's kind of funny. What's the stick called? A tang, T-A-N-G, like what the astronauts drank up in the space shuttle. That's funny. Oh, it's a tang. And the two of them kind of look at each other. They're like, oh, it's funny. It's a biscuit. They look at each other. It's kind of funny. And it is funny. But that's just talking about funny, automatopoetic sounds in the English language. They find humor in that. I love that they can just take humor out of the little teeny tiny things.
Yeah, that's what makes Dave great too, is, he is the average guy, but, doing what he's done for as long as he's done it, he has, built this insane vocabulary. And I find words to be funny. To me, there's words that are gross, that make you feel weird, and there's words that make you laugh. And I think that's just a whole part of the emotional response of language. And that's that's why people like to do what we're doing. They like to talk. We like the emotional response that we get from how people form. I love listening to people speak, because you get to see how they form a sentence. Like, well, I might have said the same thing, but I wouldn't have said it that way. And it's just unique to see how people build and structure their language, and that's one thing I appreciate about interviews and interviewees as well. And I like it when you pull a guy like David Letterman, a 75-year-old man from Midwest, and you get Kevin Durant from Washington, D.C., who's only in his 30s, and they've lived two completely insanely different existences, and they have different approaches to how they speak and how they form sentences. And just, I don't know, I really like that juxtaposition too, where you have this, middle-aged white guy, and then you have this kid who grew up in apartments complexes and stuff like that. And I don't know, I really like that. I think you get real conversations and real genuineness out of those types of interactions. Whereas you have two people from the same background, same neighborhood, the conversation might be entertaining, but it's entertaining to them because there's so much nuances and stuff and that you're just not going to get from that conversation. Whereas you take two people from two totally different worlds and have a conversation, and it's just, I feel it's more real, more genuine, and entertainment for sure. A lot more entertaining.
Well, and it's funny. It's like when the rock gets thrown into the water, into the lake, and then the ripples happen. And you and I are one of those ripples right now. So Dave and Kev have this conversation that gets edited into this beautiful little flower that is the episode. And then there's two guys like what you're talking about, again, different points of view, different backgrounds, different ages, then we're talking about it and having a conversation of it. And that's happening with people all over the place, on the phone. Hey, did you see Letterman? And it's, those ripples are happening, and maybe ripples will happen after this. You talk about words and how Dave is really good at that. I can't wait for our community. We've got the Facebook group growing, and it's good. Whatever our community, wherever we're going to gather, one of the things that I want to, to the chagrin of some and to the delight of others, that I want to cultivate. I'm also a gigantic nerd, and nerds always love to throw out the what if kind of questions. What if Superman and Thor fought? What would happen? That kind of thing. What if Hulk and I don't know. Who else? Good fight. What if that happened? Who could take who in a fight? I want to throw out right now the idea of, hey, what's your favorite word? You have one, okay, just one word responses only, please. What is your favorite word that you learned from David Letterman? And I want to see, 1,000 people who like Dave the way that we do, or maybe not the way that we do. We might be too far down the line, but who like Dave sort of as much as we do. And what word did they get from David Letterman that they would put on that list? I think mine would probably be cavalcade. I love the word cavalcade, and it's in my vernacular with a fair regular use because of Dave. I love that word, and I got it from him.
I don't use the word very much, but when I first heard it, I thought it was funny. Ecclesiastical. I didn't.
Great word.
Yeah. I didn't. Even at the time, I didn't even know what it meant or what he was talking about. It's the one I had to grab the dictionary for. But I was like, man, that word sounds hilarious. Whatever the hell he's talking about.
There we go. And no pre-interview here, folks. Look at that. It's just the enthusiasm that we share for this man. We're able to pull obscure, funny sounding words out of our ass. That's how much Rusty and Mike love David Letterman. And so much good stuff. Like, again, before we leave the shuffleboard, this is a quote from the show. This is Dave reading a pamphlet about shuffleboard. Pro tip: always use the tip of your tang to slide biscuits.
There you go.
That's a funny sentence
right here, folks.
That's a funny sentence. And I just
make sure you clean the tip of your tang before you're hitting biscuits.
Oh God. I haven't seen the tip of my tang in 4 years. I got to take a walk. Good stuff. Okay. So the show starts. I don't want to necessarily go through the shows. I just want to, chronologically, but let's start at the front of the show. I don't know about you, Rusty. I love a good cold open. I'm a fan. Whatever the show is, whether it's SNL, whether it's even dramatic shows that have a little bit of business before the opening credits hit. I've always a fan of a good cold open, and Letterman over the years, in my opinion, has been a leader in what can make a good cold open. Done probably hundreds of them, I would think. I don't have a Don Giller type encyclopedia in front of me, but I'd love to know the answer of how many cold opens they did before any of their incarnations of their shows. This show had a phenomenal cold open with Dave going to it was like a media day or something for the Brooklyn Nets and being a reporter.
Yeah, that was funny. That was actually the first bit of new content. Whenever he did that interview, that was one of the first bits of new content that I'd seen in a while from him.
Sure.
And I thought that was awesome. That was great. That was a great bit. I mean, you could tell that he had no care whatsoever about real basketball questions. He was just being Dave. And no, I really loved it because it was just like Dave in the wild is how I felt about it. Like how Bill Murray pops up everywhere. It just felt like something like, I was like, are we going to get more of this? Is he going to pop up at, like somebody's bakery or something and like put on an outfit and go back there and start baking with somebody? I mean, it was almost reminiscent of some of the bits and stuff where they go to, the on-site bits from the show. Yep. Where they would go, to different places and stuff like that. That's what it felt like. I don't know. It was really good. I really liked that open for sure. That was perfect that they took that. I think that was probably a setup for the show. Like he went to do that just in anticipation of doing the show. That was like pre-production work.
Yeah. Well, that was actually a discussion point I was going to get into. Before we do that, I got to say this. I'm so fucking grateful that as a 31-year-old, you said all the words you just said. Like this is where I've got hope that the transfer of knowledge is happening and that the extreme body of work that Dave and company did is going to live on, because you just organically observed that. I love the fact it does feel like an old school bit. Dave talked about when he moved over to Late Show, they talked about the challenge of his extreme popularity. And again, you weren't around at this point. Tom Dreesen and I talked about this the other night. And Mark Malkov and I talked about it as well, and a few others, but people who were around during the time where Letterman went from NBC to CBS, and just how in that summer, how popular he was. And at the same time, while that's happening, he's working harder than he's ever worked. I think they shot, I believe it's 19 remotes that they shot in the wild, like you said, in preparation for Late Show. And they talked about the challenge of how difficult it was becoming because of Dave's extreme fame. And they've had to find ways. So by, using Rupert, for example, where Dave was just in the earpiece, or other ways, shout out to Rupert G and Irene Hoffman, by the way. But the idea that if there were ways that they could put Dave into the wild so he could still do that, even with his extreme fame, that was a challenge, a puzzle they were always trying to solve. Having him on press day messing around. And you talked about this. I want to get to how you finished your last point. Do you think, I've got it here as a question, do you think they filmed that before or after the interview with Kevin? You think they did it beforehand?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was done beforehand. I think that was, I'm not going to speculate and say it was, but I feel like that was like some pre-production work. He was like, well, I want Kevin Durant to interview, so let me just do this, just, go up here and do this bit or whatever, and go kind of, bug him a little bit, get in his ear. And I liked how he said, well, they just let anybody in here, Kevin Durant talking about Dave. And I feel like that was a warm up for it. Yeah, that was either some pre-production, some pre-planning, just to get Kevin Durant on the show, or maybe they already knew Kevin Durant was going to be on the show and they just wanted to, as a part of their friendship, you know what I mean? That was a part of the deal of them becoming friends. I like to annoy my friends at their events. If I had, whenever my friends, not many events anymore that anybody's doing it now that we're all in our 30s, but when we're, in our young 20s and everybody was graduating college and finishing different projects and stuff, I like to pop up to everybody's events and cause a ruckus, Well,
yeah, he did that. And Kevin Durant, I believe that, and again, I'm not a huge basketball fan either. I'm more of a fan of the sneakers. I've got a pretty, I've got a decent Air Jordan collection. And again, when I get enthusiastic about something, I always go to that next level. But I do follow basketball to the point where I know that Kevin Durant has a certain kind of personality that comes out, and it's that deadpan, but not unclever deadpan.
Just real relaxed.
Relaxed is a good way of putting it. Yeah, he's not deadpan like an asshole, like some people are. He's not that guy, but he's still deadpan. But I just love Dave's last line. Durant says, okay, you're done. They make fun of the Knicks, which I've got on here too. It's so fun to listen to them make fun of the Knicks. But he makes his Knicks joke. And then on the way out, Letterman says something. And again, I think he pulls out a word that is funny nonetheless, never mind the name of an NBA team. Hey, but whenever you go play the Pelicans, do you just giggle a little? And it broke Kevin. It broke him out of that relaxed.
Yeah.
He laughed. He giggled.
Yeah, he did. He had to laugh with him on that one.
With the word Pelican. There's a sports team at the highest level named the Pelicans. And that is funny. Like,
it is. Yeah,
and that's how name. Boom. And then boom, piano plays, Paul Schaefer, his little ditty that he did. That's a great cold open. I loved that. I don't know if they had done the interview or the shuffleboard game before or not. However, clearly there was a rapport that was already established between the two. That's another question I have. It's so funny. I hear Dave talk about this with Kevin on camera. He talked about it during the Julie Louis-Dreyfus interview. I think it was hers, where maybe it was one of the other ones. I don't know. They're all kind of blurring together a little bit, but he actually talked about the fact that he said, oh, Kevin Durant, he said he falls in love with the subject across from him. And then he says things like, oh, Kevin, I would really like to be your friend afterwards. And I think that was really
Will Smith, I think, wasn't it?
Will Smith. That's who it was.
Yeah.
I think that's, and he says, and I think he means it. I think that at the end of the day, I know I certainly feel that way. When you have a bit of a communal experience with somebody in a long form where you're both being vulnerable, it's hard to not have that feeling of saying, I want to be your friend. And that's what he said to Kevin. And so I felt like that started during the media day. I think that process has already been underway.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I imagine by that point, they probably had a few conversations on the phone. If not, already had a meeting or something, face-to-face dinner or something like that, I would imagine.
Yeah. I think you're probably right.
Hey,
about that.
I hate to interrupt our flow, but I really
No.
have to piss. And if I don't, I'm going to piss myself. I've
Hey,
been
I tell
drinking
you what,
coffee all morning.
No. This is great. This is an exercise in because we haven't had to do anything editing wise to any of the shows so far. So we're going to continue that fashion. I'm going to say you go, and we're going to give myself an exercise in acumen, podcast acumen. I don't even know if that's the right word, but we're going to see if I can talk my way through you going and taking a piss. And if I can, gold star as a podcast host. So you go, and I'm just going to continue on here, and we'll take it from there. Because we do this, ladies and gentlemen. We're pros, and Rusty's pro bladder is working very, very well. By the way, a bushel of crabs, it consists of 96 crabs. So if ever you're wanting to buy a bushel of crabs, understand you're going to have 96 of those suckers running around if they haven't perished first. 96 crabs. Kevin Durant and David Letterman talked about that when he was in they talked about family a lot, and KD has a large family. I think he made a joke that they all populated all over the place and they spread themselves around all over the place, but they were talking about Maryland. They were talking about crab roasts and things, and he said that he gave us the piece of information that 96 crabs in a bushel. And that's they're one of the many things you will learn on my next guest needs no introduction with David Letterman episode with Kevin Durant. You will learn that a bushel of crabs, 96. So I
96,
feel like
folks.
There you 96. Go. Hey, we did it.
But he can only eat 12. He can only eat 12. Right, I imagine if he could eat 96, I'd be worried.
Yeah, no, that would be a different talent. I love how the show was edited. You know, it's funny. One of Dave's producers is also a guy who works very closely with Jerry Seinfeld, and I remember an episode that Dave showed up on. Oh no, maybe it was Dave interviewing Jerry Seinfeld about comedians in cars getting coffee. He was on a stage somewhere. Maybe it was the Paley Center. I don't remember, but and he took. Jerry had brought a clip of raw footage of, I believe it was Sarah Silverman on the Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee episode. And then they showed the edited footage, which had all the music in it. It was going back and forth. So kind of like a before and after. I don't know if you ever saw that or not, but it's irrelevant for the question. The editing that Dave did, or that Dave's, goons did on this show reminded me a little bit in a couple places of Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. It had some snappy music. They were going back and forth, a little clip here, a little word there, a little bit of snappy music over here now. And I just loved how the episode was edited. When considering the constraints of not being able to have a live audience for this one, I thought they did a really good job mixing it up a little bit. So it wasn't just two guys in a chairs looking at each other, kind of like a Tom Schneider type thing. It's Dave's kind of take on that.
Yeah, I watched all of Comedians in Cars with Coffee because I like comedy and I like cars, so it kind of all worked out really good in that show. So yeah, I watched it. And yeah, I kind of see what you're saying about some of the similar editing techniques or whatever that were used by the editors, where, like you said, it's the quick, jazzy kind of elevator, I guess, esque type music. And you can see that for sure. I definitely agree with you on that. It's definitely there.
Well, and then going back to them playing basketball and the quick edits of them playing basketball, we're going to have a picture come out here. I'm going to put it in the Tom Dreesen episode. Tom Dreesen sent me a lot of personal photos of Dave back in the day, and even up to a few weeks ago, which I'm very grateful for. He also gave me permission that we can use them. Love that. One of the pictures was back in the day at the Comedy Store. There was a basketball team that Dave was on. And a very effective member of that team to boot. By the way, a little bit of trivia. Do you know what the Comedy Store basketball team was called?
No, I do not actually. No, that's what I don't know.
Perfect name. And I was delighted by it. The Bombers.
Okay. Yeah, that's perfect. I like that.
Right?
That's very good. Yeah, that's very good.
So we're watching Dave, and I mean, it's adorable scenes of him shooting and making baskets. And one of the questions is, okay, well, how many takes did it take for Dave to make those baskets and things? It was edited very, very well. But how delightful was it him trying to give Kevin Durant an alley-oop.
Oh, that was fun. That was great. I appreciated that for sure. And I wonder if that was some producer that came up with that, or if that was Kevin. And I like to think that the producer didn't have any say in what, or any kind of suggestions. I like to think it was just genuine and organic.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate it for sure. It was hilarious watching him attempt to put the ball right where, because you have to have it in a specific place to be able to, just in a certain area, especially for a professional. I'm sure he could have grabbed most any ball he threw at him and did whatever with it, but just to be able to get it in that sweet spot to do a good alley oop, that was awesome. It was funny
And
very comedic.
Absolutely. And over the years, I mean, that's when it comes to athletics, again, Dave's style, immediately out of the gate, no matter what the context is, if it's anything but serious, the first thing Dave does is the self-deprecation. And he, tries to lower the expectations. I think about over the years, anytime he had a football in his hand, but then he'd throw and he'd have a cannon. Like Dave is athletic. He runs, I believe.
Well, he was a C student.
Yeah.
So I imagine that he had some kind of athleticism. Well, you got to think of the era he grew up into. There was way more athleticism was you're not a boy, or you're not a man if you can't throw a football, or you can't catch it. So he grew up in that age of a certain level of masculinity had to be present for you to be considered, a man or whatever. So I think that might have had something to do with the reason why he was athletic. Had he grew up in a different day and age, would he have been as athletic? Maybe not. Maybe he would have been, focused more on comedy at a younger age than waiting till he was in his, 20s or almost 30s before he really took stride with it.
Yeah. Well, Indiana Hoosiers, right? And basketball is huge out there, his love for auto racing, but also a guy, anybody who can run. And I think it's 10 miles a day. If I'm right, at least at one point he was running 10 miles a day. I don't know if he still does that.
Oh, wow.
Not.
I didn't know that. Yeah. That's crazy. I didn't know that.
Oh, over the years, whenever there was like paparazzi photos of Dave, and I feel bad for him because, I don't really feel bad for Dave. Dave, is doing well too. But anytime the paparazzi would try and get pictures of him, actually, I think the first picture of his beard was actually a paparazzi photo of him running. There would be shots of him running because he would run, again, 10 miles or whatever it was. And so there's the opportunity to get the elusive David Letterman and get a photo of him. But I mean, I don't know about you, but when I'm running, I don't look my best. It's certainly not the most flattering of images, to say the least, of me running. But yeah, I mean, Dave's an athlete but he downplays it. And that's the genius of it. So when he actually does something athletic and it looks amazing, I think about, again, some Peyton Manning stuff, segments on the show, throwing footballs anytime it was a Christmas tree or to a cab. He's got game, and I love that.
Yeah, I like that too. I like it. It shows that he's not just a talk show host, that he actually has another life,
Yeah. There's a moment, again, I have a love of personal development. There's a moment where Dave and KD share that I think is worth talking about. He asked Kevin if Kevin gets nervous, and Kevin went back. Like, I love the times where they were reciprocal to each other. And he asked him if he gets nervous before games or before a big game or maybe it was before the Olympics with Kobe. Or something.
So Dave had told his basketball story about how Bob Brown put him in and he was scared. He said, do you ever get scared before like a big moment in your life? And I like how he said, I don't really get scared. I get, nervous or anxious, and then Dave was like, well, I get excited. I kind of feel like that. And he was like, yeah. And that's what they said. Yeah. And I kind of feel the same way at big moments of my life. Like, I've never really been one to be afraid to do things or jump out on a limb or anything like that. It was never fear that ever put me out. It was always the anxiety and the anxiousness behind, or like, well, now I'm on the stage and now I'm at the forefront of it. Like, I'm the guy now. I have to be the one to jump off this point to make things work and make things shake. And it's never the fear of it. It's always the anxiousness. It's like a pit in the middle of your chest, and you you're not, like I said, it's not like a point of fear, but you feel it in your gut, you feel it in your chest. It could change your breathing. And I've had quite a few moments like that in my life for sure. Yeah. But it's never fear, it's always that anxiousness, and it's just hard. It's one of those hard things to shake for sure.
Yeah, and the fact that the two of them could relate to each other in that, because they both have been put into extremely stressful situations with literally millions of people watching them, and
Absolutely.
The fact that they got into fear and anxiety versus excitement. I've had in my other podcast, I've had like coaches and counselors and psychologists and things like that. And one of the things that I've learned in this melting pot of personal development that's been thrust upon me, or one of the ideas that I've been told, and it makes sense to me. I've subscribed to it and I've actually tried it and it works. Apparently, biologically, when you are afraid of something, the things that go on inside your head and inside your heart, the biological impulses that are firing electrically, the hormones and pheromones and that are released, and all of the things, the chemical biology of what happens when you are afraid is very similar or identical in some cases to the biological things that happen when you're excited. They're actually the same thing. And if you become aware that you're afraid of something, you can actually tell yourself, oh, I'm excited about this. And you could actually change the trajectory of your thoughts and where you might be going by flipping over. And now you're excited as opposed to being afraid. I've done it. I know it works. And I think the two of them were kind of touching on this. And then the fact that Dave said, and by the way, there's always another show. Say we missed up, we tanked one, whatever, there's always another show. And I think that that's a beautiful example of living life as well. You know what? You may have duffed that one or hit it right in the dirt, bunted out, whatever, but there's always another game. And I just love the idea of that. And I think that the two of them really gave a gift in that discussion.
Yeah, I agree. That was one of my favorite parts of it, outside of the conversation about weed and video games. That was my favorite conversation that they had, because it brought them to a human level, and that as human beings, we all experience, it doesn't matter if you're worth $500 million or if you've got $5 in your pocket, we all feel these same human feelings.
Yep.
And it's great to see these people that we see as unfeeling, unemotional beings, because that's how a lot of these celebrities and people are viewed as, they're on a pedestal, if you will, and they're not seen as on the same level. It's like, well, they were able to achieve all this great fame and wealth and all this, well, so they have to be different than me, that they can't be me, they can't be the same as me because of everything that they've achieved in their life. And
Yes.
I think a lot of people get into that mentality instead of figuring out whatever they figured out to get where they are. They spend a lot of their lives dwelling on, well, they must have some kind of special trait that is DNA driven, because I don't have whatever it is in me to be that way. And at the end of the day, it boils down to, they are the same as we are, flesh and bone, riddled with anxiety, so.
Yeah. I want to talk about the last two things, because this, as you know, when the camera turns on, time gets slippery. And you and I could go forever on a variety of subjects. You and I could go forever. I just
forever,
appreciate
absolutely.
that. I appreciate your insights. I want to talk about weed and video games. Those are two of the topics I want to make sure we get to. You just alluded to them. But to finish your point, it brought me back to and I'm sure we're going to do postmortems to go back, because content machines like a podcast are hungry beasts that are never fully satisfied no matter how much you feed them. I think we're going to postmortem and go back the 4 seasons. I certainly am enjoying this discussion here. This is our first postmortem, and I'm grateful that it's you as my counterpart.
I'm grateful you asked me to be here.
Oh, and it's not going to be the last one, son. I promise you that. I think back to the very first My Next Guest, by what you were just talking about. President Obama, former President Obama was the guest, and at the very end, Dave was kind of wrapping up, and then President Obama said, "Well, hold on a second. Like, let's talk for 1 second about to see if we can take. You and I have been very lucky." And there's a certain degree of luck to getting to a position like that. There's always a certain degree of luck. You can manifest, you can set intentions, you can work hard and all of that. But there's always a little bit of, I think President Obama used the term magic dust, I think is what he said. And he said, "Hey, can we talk about this? And maybe we can take some of that magic dust and sprinkle it for folks to hear." And I really do think that is something that is just, whether it's intentional or not, I think that is something Dave wants to do.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that's something that he wants to do too. Absolutely.
And I appreciate that so much about the fact that he's able to take his success and try and make the world a better place while making fun of himself while he does it. I appreciate that about him.
Yeah, I appreciate that about him too. And yeah, I see that point as well, and that's what I like about all these human conversations is he's breaking down that fourth wall, if you will, for all these people. Like, people see Cardi B as this unintelligent musician and artist, when in fact she's deeper than that, and she spent a lot of her life doing political outreach things that reach out to her, and that was when she was dancing as a stripper. She was doing those kind of things. So it tells more about humanity and us and how we view them. It says more about us than it says about the actual people that we see this way. It says more about the human condition, how we view wealth and success, and we think that all these people, just because they are successful and wealthy, they don't have an emotional response to life or the world. And it's totally opposite of what's true.
Oh, I couldn't have said it better myself, to the fact that I'm going to move on to weed and video games. Thank you very much for saying that. I think that's exactly right. Talk about marijuana. I'll get really, I'm from the land of British Columbia, Canada. There's a term called BC Bud. It is. I
was going to say that. Yeah. BC Bud. Yeah.
Kind of legendary. A friend of mine, his name is Adam Scorgi, did a documentary called The Union. And then the sequel, The Culture High, Joe Rogan was on it. The original film, The Union, was based on the black market weed business in British Columbia, where I'm from, and the effects of that black market, the effects and actually weed and the effects on the biology. And it was a weed documentary that was way ahead of its time. It was one of the very first ones. It was actually screened in our parliament buildings in Ottawa, our country's capital. And at the end of the day, there are people who have submitted the idea that Adam, who grew up in the same city I'm from, and is a friend of mine, and our show, our men's mental wellness podcast, actually was a step in getting marijuana legalized in Canada, or non-criminalized in Canada. It was a step of that process. Now, when it came to weed, though, I was brought up in the just say no generation, where weed was like Dave said in the show here, "Oh, you're going to hell now." Like
it was the same when I was growing up too. Yeah. Like I'm from Texas, so that mentality still exists in lots of places where in Texas for sure.
And it still exists here in BC, by the way. I don't want to take my province and my country and come across saying that we were a bunch of pot smoking hippies up here. No, there's definitely a polarization, but to a lesser extent now than there was maybe 15 years ago, because the level of knowledge is coming out, the level of misinformation and the truth is happening. Is coming out because of the misinformation that was spread about marijuana. And I think that Dave is doing a really good job. He has talked about how substances stopped him from achieving what he wanted to achieve. And good for him for sobering up at the age that he did, right around the time that late night started, I believe. But at the same time, has this fascination with weed. And when he talks to somebody who is a weed enthusiast or someone who is educated on the subject, he does. And he certainly did that with Kevin Durant in this episode. And to the point where they even talked about destigmatizing weed. Now, I discovered weed when I was 38 years old. I'm 46 now. Even though I'm from BC, I know that could probably get me kicked out of the province, but I'm admitting it now. I was 38 when I started. And it's not
better
like
late than never. Better late than never.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, that's right. That's what most of my my friends who have discovered it years before. The introspection that comes with weed is incredible. I'm not an everyday user, not even an every week user necessarily, but there are some times where I need to go into that learning tree. I know that you've already kind of tipped your hand as to how you feel about it. How cool was it to see David Letterman and Kevin Durant having that conversation?
I think it's great. I think those conversations need to be had more often, especially in the scope of athletes, because some people have had their entire careers ruined by the fact that they just wanted to enjoy marijuana. And one of them that I could specifically think of was a guy from Baylor by the name of Josh Gordon. And Josh Gordon he was a star wide receiver, all-star wide receiver. And he probably would have been one of the top 10 of all time had his career not been derailed by the fact that he liked to smoke weed and couldn't stop. Whether it was a point of addiction or a bad thing for him, I don't know. But I know as somebody who is an advocate for something, it doesn't matter what the rules and policies of everything are. If you're an advocate for ethical, the changing of laws that are unethical, then you have to push it. That you have to push it to that limit to where you do go to jail for what you stand up for or whatever it may be. And I'm not saying it to that extreme level, but I've seen it ruin good athletes' careers just because they want to wind down after having their bodies torn up on a football field and ease their minds. And as somebody who uses, I use it a little bit more extensively than once a week, and without it, my mind wouldn't be quiet. It would just be constant rattle. And as somebody who, is obsessive over things, like you could relate to, your mind can't quiet sometimes. And it's constantly at 100 miles an hour. And and it's funny that we're having this conversation because I was on Instagram and they took the clip of Dave and him talking about weed and posted it on the David Letterman actual, official Instagram. Yeah. And I was just scrolling through the comment section because I just wanted to see, because the generation of people that watch Dave, are from that just say no generation. Like my dad loves Ronald Reagan. You know what I mean? He's from that generation. So seeing them have that conversation and go back and seeing all of the crazy comments from middle-aged white women was just insane. Yeah. I thought it was funny as all get out. I'm like, have you ever smoked it? Because if you had, you couldn't be stressed out enough to write a comment saying, oh, Dave's going to pot, Kevin Durant's ruining our children. And, it's they're not responsible for your kids. Like, I've never understood why people get mad at athletes for smoking pot or musicians for doing drugs or anything like that. At the end of the day, they didn't ask to be your child's favorite band or favorite basketball player. They didn't say, hey, here's a sign-up sheet, sign up for me to be your role model. And I don't like when people force that role of role model onto athletes. Yep. So I like that he could have that conversation and bring it to light. And not only that, it's just we're in a world now where the financial benefit from it for everybody as far as tax benefits goes is it's undeniable. You can't see
look at the
what
state
it
of Colorado
does
right now. Absolutely.
Yeah, they're rolling in and the same with other states that have legalized it. They're rolling in the tax revenue. Yeah. And they did controversial take here, but if Texas legalized weed tomorrow, the next day it would be the largest weed market. As soon as the dispensaries and everything was fleshed out, it would be the largest weed market in the world.
Well, I don't know much about Texas, but I do know that everything is bigger in Texas, and that makes sense to me. Even your weed market. And I can't wait for that to happen. I believe it's inevitable for
it's only a
you
matter of
guys.
time.
Yeah, it's coming. And you know, it's funny, just to put a little exclamation point on what you just said too. Well said. We'll get to video games and we'll get the hell out of here. But again, a little bit of experience in the pro wrestling world. Have had folks, you know, conversations with folks who worked for World Wrestling Entertainment or still worked for them at that point with the Legends contract, that kind of a thing. And you talk about the psychological or the emotional impact. Then there's the physical one, and there are guys and gals who work for that company who have been suspended for weed use, but at the same time, prescription opioids were no problem at all. Oh, you tested positive for an opioid. Oh, no, I got this script from my doctor. Oh, okay, you're fine. Versus tested for marijuana. And there's one gentleman who won't go in the WWE Hall of Fame until their wellness policy includes, and it's happening right now, I believe it's happening with World Wrestling Entertainment.
It's changing with all sports. They have they can no longer have that be a thing because it's so widespread. And it was probably been that way for years. It's been so widespread, but everybody's hidden it. Like you hear these stories of all these, because I've watched a lot of podcasts sports related, and you hear all these stories of these pros that used to smoke and then go onto the field and have all-star games because they were able to control the noise. I mean, you know, you got the 12th man, and then you've got all the noise on the field between the players, and then you got all the noise in your mind for everything that's going on. You know, we talk about mental health, everything that's going on at home, and you know, these guys are young, a lot of money thrown in their lap. You know, a lot of them don't know how to handle all that, and to be able to imbibe in a medicine that has been, you know, that in a medicinal benefit from it is just, it's absurd to think that a plant that you could grow from seed causes such a ruckus.
And so you know, it's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds. And as Dave and company put out new content, I believe that they're going to talk about it as it comes up and not shy away from it. I appreciate that. Kevin Durant talked about video games. Video games have a place in your heart. As we get out of here, I'm going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to ask you about your other projects that you are, and there are many of them.
Quite a few.
One of the projects you're involved in is video game project and podcast. KD is talking about life after basketball, and it includes video games. Massive industry, has developed into ways that people can build careers into it, that kind of a thing. He's in Call of Duty tournaments and stuff. How stoked were you when he started talking about the video game life that he has?
I was pretty stoked about it, but he's right. He again in relation to the weed, he's talking about two things that are huge, that are on the edge of, you know, or not even on the edge of anymore. They are huge markets. And video games for sure. It's insane. The streaming part of it, Twitch and all of that. There's guys on there that are in their early 30s, and there's actually a guy who's in his late 20s who makes $2 million to $3 million a month. Just live streaming video games and live streaming, you know, his content. And he's right. The future of, you know, sports, esports as it is, there's money. There's going to be money to be made. And if you have the money and the capital to enter that market, that's a market that you have to enter if that's something you're passionate about. And he spoke about, the question was, what is video games for you, and how important are they in your life? And he's like, I got to have them. I like them every day. I got to play them every, you know, it's another outlet, you know, for people whose mind's not quiet. It's a place to put all that focus and all that noise into one focus, and it gives you another way to relax and calm your mind. And again, I come from a generation where video games, it was a stereotype that played video games. It wasn't everybody. It wasn't, you know, universal. It wasn't a universal concept as it is now. But when I was a kid, a certain type of kid played video games in your mind. When you thought of a gaming kid, you thought of a kid that was sweaty, covered in acne, and pissed in 2 liters. You know, and that's what the perception was. And I like that he's able to say, look at me, I'm a 6 foot tall basketball player that could literally get any woman that I want and do anything that I want to do and go anywhere that I want to go. But I like video games.
Absolutely.
And as a kid who was put often in that stereotype of, oh, you like video games? Oh, you're a nerd. As a kid who grew up like that, the podcast is titled "Video Games Are for Losers," by the way, and that's to show that
Awesome.
tongue in cheek.
Sure.
It's a
A
tongue in
little
cheek
Letterman-esque,
response.
by the way. I will throw that
Yeah,
out
absolutely.
there. Yep.
It's a little tongue in cheek thing to say that, video games are for losers, but it's universal. We're all losers. Everybody loves video games nowadays, and listening to my kids speak about video games and then going to school events and listening to him and his buddies talk about video games. I'm like, that didn't happen when we were kids.
No.
When I was a kid, there was the athletic kids, and, it just seemed like there was more stereotypes in school. And it was crazy seeing my kid interact with his classroom the other day at field day. And I'm like, there's no way I got along with that many kids.
Yeah.
Like everybody just got along so well. It just seemed like in the world that we're in now, a lot of the stereotypes are being broken by the fact that these industries are so hugely popular now, billion-dollar industries, when before it was like, oh, well, oh, you play Nintendo? Oh, you have to be, you got to be a nerd, or your parents have to be rich because you have video games, that kind of thing.
I hate that we have to end this, but we have to end it. I think Napoleon Dynamite was just, as you say that, I think about Napoleon Dynamite and how, to me, that movie, you talk about a middle America type thing, and every stereotype you could think of was kind of represented there. And at the end, that guy dancing on stage became the hero. I think that's happening right now all over the place in Twitch, and the folks that are heroes on Twitch are showing us and leading the way through that. I can't wait to, when we get a little bit of money for this thing, like you and I both, we're labors of love in what we do, in all of the broadcasting that we do. I can't wait till I have a little bit of money. I can hire somebody who knows all of this stuff and can show how we can do this on Twitch and then release it to the conventional channels later. And we can just grow everything that we're growing right now. In a minute or less, because we do got to get out of here, talk about the podcasts that you're involved with that you would love the public to know about. And this certainly isn't going to be the last time that you're on here. You're a friend of the show. We're starting this Letterman Podcast Network. Hopefully other folks, shout out to the Late Night Playset and others, we'll all want to band together and we can do our own brands, and people can find whichever ring of the circus that they like, but we can promote each other. Talk about,
absolutely,
to bring us home with some of the podcasts you're doing, Rusty.
Make it quick, short, and sweet. There's 3 that I'm actually involved in. 2 I do with Mike Hamilton from Rogue Media Network here in Waco. The 2 that I do with him are BWAAA, King of the Hill Rewatch Podcast, where we take King of the Hill episode by episode. We've just hit season 2.
Nice.
So be on the lookout for that. And we also do Wake the Kids and Phone the Neighbors, a David Letterman tribute podcast. And in that podcast, we take a different approach. We are doing interviews as well. So anybody that wants to interview, feel free to hit me up, or hit up Mike Chisholm and let me know. And we'll get something set up. But my approach is a little different. It's a historical approach, since I don't really have a lot of core memories from past 2005 for David Letterman. It's real hard for me to do the same podcast that you guys would be doing, which is not what we want to do. We want to have different podcasts and be able to bounce off each other and stuff. But the way I take it is I like to dissect his guests. I like to talk about different guest appearances they had. I like to talk about just the historical stuff. I talked a lot about his college days. I talked a little bit about his relationship with Meryl Marco and how influential she was in his career. And without her, we probably wouldn't have David Letterman kind of stuff. And talk about a lot of the things that prop Dave up, as well as talk about Dave. Because without the machine behind Dave, we wouldn't have these conversations. Because it takes a village, and it takes a lot of people to believe in your concept and your ideas for your ideas to come to fruition in $100 million way. So the other podcast. And the other podcast that we're doing is Video Games Are for Losers. That one is a separate project from Road Media Network. That is something I'm developing personally. It is with a high school buddy of mine who is a content creator. He goes by the name Cliff Goat. And we decided that we wanted to do a talk show kind of thing where we just talk to each other about hot topics of the day, whether it be video game technology related, even a little political, the politics related to video games where they're blaming gun violence on video games and things like that. And we had those conversations. So those are the 3 projects I work with directly. And I also help do social media for a few other ones. There's 2 comic book podcasts that I'm helping out right now. One is called Bros, Foes, and Heroes, and the other one is the Long Box Podcast.
Nice.
And Bros, Foes, and Heroes takes a pretty unique take on how they approach comic books. They take weird comic book figures. For instance, they go to the public domain and pull crazy different heroes and things like that. So that's what I'm doing right now.
A lot of cleverness around you, a lot of entertainment around you. Rusty, this is just a beginning. It's almost even a little teaser having you on the Post Mortem before the other one. Thank you for taking time out of your day to be part of this.
Oh, no problem. I've enjoyed it.
Oh, love it, man. Let's build things together. And I appreciate everything that you and Mike are doing, and all of your projects. I can't wait to talk more. That is it. The debut episode of the Post Mortem on the David Letterman Podcast, the Kevin Durant episode. So grateful for everything. That has been another episode of the Letterman Podcast. My name is Mike Chisholm. Thank you and good night.
Overcoat and underpants.